Okay, couple of housekeeping things. Remember to take and offer POIs. They're an important part of the game. They'll factor into adjudication. Useful to indicate how you want to receive POIs at the start of your speeches. Without any further ado then, I invite the Prime Minister to open the debate. Here.
Okay, am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. Turko, block me, man. Okay. Okay, just check the papers one more time. Okay, just before I start my speech, just a little trigger warning. There might be like depictions of certain acts that might be violent, that might sound traumatic to some. So just to make that clear, I will not go into great detail, but just want to make everybody aware. And with that being out of the way, I will start this debate in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Panel, let's first look at what the status quo exists. What are the alternatives here? I think there are a growing amount of institutions that are battling like the problem of drugs. Why? Number one, there are many different drug epidemics happening right now, meaning that the states need to solve them in order to have more peace, less crime, and better population living in their cities, meaning they're very invested in investing in more of these places opening. Number two, there is a shift in narratives, right? We're no longer hating on people who consume drugs a lot. We see them as victims of circumstance, of bad upbringing, of bad societal standing. We want to help them. Three, there's now effective and more cheaper medical supplements that can help you battle addiction. And fourthly, there's just a growing like empathy and political capital from people who want to help other people who do drugs because they maybe themselves do drugs. They have some friends happening because drugs are now more like across all society used. There are like many different state institutions, many different NGOs, many different international institutions that people can go in even if this gets banned. So with traditionally unchecked absolute power of the church, rehabilitation centers are prime ground for abuse of addicts. Now, why are churches generally extremely hard to control by the government once they set up a building, once they set up something they own, they do? Number one, there's like this general secular deal that the government meddles minimally in the church operations, right? We do not check what happens behind the doors of churches in like the places where people talk directly to priests. Generally, when they hold rituals, they can literally like not abide by COVID measures. They're very powerful in that sense. Secondarily, those institutions that often check other like are people doing well are generally underfunded and are struggling to even check like some institutions, let alone institutions such as big and strong as church, where if they like go public with something they found out, their risk to be attacked by basically religious people. Here the government just does one ban and then it runs some backlash, but it fades away because this is not something that a lot of people deeply care about, right? Thirdly, well, because people see it as infallible, right? If we are checking the church, if we're claiming the church is curing its patients badly, we're directly attacking the dogma that the church has been propagating about itself for centuries. Finally, there's low scrutiny within the organization, as we see. Often priests see those priests above them as infallible. People working with the church often deeply believe in the narratives of the church, meaning that their brothers and their brethren Christians cannot be bad people who are doing bad things. They must have misunderstood something. They must not know something fully, and all of these things. What we often see here is like in examples, like there's like widely spread pedophilia all over churches in basically the entire world. In US, people have literally like priests have literally assaulted kids, right, during their time in church. We think this is proof, and this has been hidden for many years. Now imagine if we allow them to take care of people who are very vulnerable, who are in deep psychological trauma, deep like hell, like physically, and who are afraid and who are very like malleable to different psychological abuse and manipulation. We think finally we think that some cooperation with church can be allowed if the medical staff that works in one of these centers wants to cooperate with the church, who wants to include some religious practices within the work of the working with in rehabilitation. We think that usually those doctors will know better when to allow this. They maybe have some priests that are good with them, that they know will behave in a certain way. So what are some uniquely things that make people who work in these centers who are like who would be related to church more likely to commit some bad acts. Number one, narratives of sin and giving into temptations. Many of them do see these people as sinful. They see them as like not being able to resist the temptations of drugs. Secondarily, tradition of violent and traumatic methods and rituals used in like curing people who are sick. For example, in Serbia, there was literally this center, and they were beating with shovels like patients because they believe that is what will make them cured. Thirdly, there is often a refusal to use medicine, right? When they go into withdrawal, they would want to give them the supplement for the drug because they believe that it's the same like devilish thing of temptation that they should not consume. Fourthly, there is a complete belief in one's infallibility, right? If they commit one of these acts and the patient reacts badly, they believe that they have all the divine knowledge needed to cure this person. Notice, panel, we do not need every single one of these institutions to be this bad. We only need some of them to be this bad, to make this harmful enough for patients that we as a government must protect them and ban all of these institutions, because as we have explained, it is going to be really hard for us to find out, basically impossible for us to find out which of these institutions are terrible and are doing all of these practices. And that is why we must blanket ban them before allowing something like this to fester. What are these terrible deeds? I believe they're like, as I have already given an example, different rituals, like maybe they will be forced to go really hungry or a long time without a drug, just because they do not want to give them the medicinal alternative. Secondarily, they are going to be like threatened with hell. They're going to be threatened if you do not stop, the God will not love you, that you will never be able to see your family again. They're going to be attacked in these ways because people believe that that is something in church, that is something that traditionally is used to change people's behaviors. They're not going to be allowed to speak about this abuse because that will also be seen as sin. This will also be seen as going away from the church authority, and now God, heaven is your only way out, so you have to basically abide by what we tell you. Does closing have anything?
Okay, I have a POI for you. You're saying about you being hungry and not getting the medicine, but what is the counterfactual? It is you being a drug addict.
The counterfactual, as I have already explained, there is a lot of alternatives that people will go into, and that is very likely that are going to help them. But I will give even more reasons why this. Number one, possibility. Now let's weigh all of these things. Possibility of terrible things happening to you. Notice that this severity can completely destroy someone's life. Even their best alternative, you have to wait like some more time, maybe a month, to go into a rehab. That is the best alternative. We still think that is all right. Notice how we do not allow operations which have really high likelihood of killing you or harming you terribly, even though if they have some likelihood of doing something beneficial to you. Secondarily, all of these methods that I have explained are very ineffective, meaning that if you are suffering through all of this, it would literally be better for you to just be in another center and not losing all this time here. And also, people who go into these centers might often need to have some more psychological help, some more drug help after this, meaning that they are just taking places of other people in those regular centers, instead of them just going to these regular centers, to these regular ways of curing themselves and then being ready to go out. Panel. We cannot allow such terrible things to happen to anyone, even if there is a small chance.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for that speech and call upon the Leader of the Opposition to open the case for the upbench. Here.
Am I visible and audible?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I just love the fact that government comes here and asserts the idea that there's so many growing alternatives without actually giving any reasonable explanation why that is in fact true. Because the truth is that it isn't the truth. The truth is that there is not any alternatives, and even if they were, they are not going to happen and they are not better. But I will prove all that in my positive content. Also, a lot of things that open government gave us were factually just not true. They were just factually incorrect. It seems like open government doesn't know that Alcoholics Anonymous is basically a religious institution. That's first thing. Secondly, they use the most extreme examples to prove their point. That means that they didn't even try to beat us at our best. And thirdly, even if some claims that they did say understand, like they didn't give us an appropriate alternative and a realistic alternative, and they didn't explain to you why no treatment is better than at least some treatment. Now onto our positive content. So what do we bring to you this debate? First thing that we bring to you is that no one else is going to do it better, and secondly, why church is basically like the thing that you need. Why is that the most important thing, and why is that actually going to help you the best? So let's start with the first argument. Why no one else would actually do it better? Firstly, let's talk about church. Church in its core, however corrupt and whatever it is, it does want to help. It is the rule of charity. They do want to help underprivileged people. They do want to like do charitable things because it is in their core, it is in their religious practice. But even if they do not do it like from the goodness of their own heart or not, they're going to do it because, and they do it nowadays because what? It makes them look good. Like churches really care about their image, especially nowadays where there's a lot of controversy. They care that they seem good. They care that they help people who are in danger and that need help. And they know that they're going to have a pretty good reputation for it. Also, we have to understand one very important thing, that government does not care about drug addicts. Why? Because they're not a relevant voting group. What does that mean? That means, unfortunately, because of the circumstances that drug addicts go through, because of their lifestyle, because of how they act, because they commit smaller crimes, because people actually do not like them, because they just are so consumed by the addiction that they have, they do not bother to vote. And do you know what does that mean? That means that government practically knows, the government knows that they're not a relevant voting group. Therefore, government doesn't have any incentive to actually help those people. And even if it does, we didn't hear it from the opening government. Also, another thing, you have to understand that like drug addicts aren't very popular amongst general society, right? People, unfortunately, do have a lot of predispositions about drug addicts. They believe that they are only like ruining the country, that they are committing crimes, that they are like the worst of the worst. What does that mean? That means the government doesn't have any incentive to talk about those issues, to bring them up, because they know that other people actually do not want to hear them, because most of the people do not care, because most of the people think in a way that, oh, you did this to yourself, it is your issue, you are just you are just in the way of our country's major prosperity and whatnot. Even though this is like wrong opinion of the majority of the society, it is unfortunately like so. And also, fifth reason for why no one would do it better, especially the state, is that religious institutions are already established. That means that you do not actually have to pull the weight that you do have to pull on the government side. You already have an institution, you already have those rehab institutions that are put in place. You have competent people who are doing things, people with much experience with drug addicts, with curing drug addicts and stuff like that, which on their side you do not have. You would have to start everything from the bottom up. On our side of the house, you have everything already prepared. Second thing I want to talk to you about is why is religion and generally this churches help the main things that drug addicts need. Let's start from the beginning. We have to understand that drug addicts are going to seek help only when they hit the rock bottom. Why? Because of the nature of the drugs and drug addiction, you do not want to accept that you have a problem. You always like have it in your mind, oh, I can stop whenever I want, it is fine, I do not have a problem, blah blah blah. That means that the only time you're actually going to like try to seek help is when you hit rock bottom, when you don't have any more money, when all of your family has left. Secondly, the second thing that we need to understand is that because of everything that I've already said, because those people do not understand that they have a problem, because those people don't want to admit to themselves most of their life that they do have a serious issue, they lose the community that they already have. When I say they lose the community, I mean they lose their family, they lose their friends. Even if we cannot prove they lose everyone, we can prove that they lose a large number of that house, because drug addiction comes with a lot of consequences, which is seeking, asking for money from your friends because you want to buy drugs, losing your job, not being able to support your family, all of the other side effects of drug abuse that actually come are very affecting your community, and that is why most likely your community is going to pull away. Even if they do not pull away themselves, you're going to run away from them, because if your community loves you, they're going to try to make you see that you have a problem, right? And you do not want to accept that you have a problem, so you are going to push them away even more. That means now that you are left without the community, you hit the rock bottom. What do we actually give you here? We give you structure. We give you an established institution, as already said, that has structure. Why is structure in religion, in drug addiction treatment so important? Because when you have a drug addiction, you actually need structure. The structure that they provide you is going to those meetings daily, going to church twice, 3 times a week, whatever. What does that mean? That means that now you have actually some kind of sense and meaning in life. You do not have to, like, you don't even have the time to think about abuse of drugs, to think about abusing that and stuff like that. Also, the community. Now, when you push everyone away, you have this community that is ready, that is staying there, that understands your issues, that since it has been established for a long time, understands how to approach you, understands how to best help you. Have people who have been through the same shit that you did, and also with all of this, now you also have this another thing in common, which is religion, which is belief, which is the sense of meaning that the church gives you. And also, final reason why church is the best thing for drug addicts is reassurance that the church gives you. Because even if other society tells you that because you are a drug addict, you are a bad person and stuff like that, you have church that is constantly reassuring you. So the sense of reassurance is so important here, because you're going to constantly hear that God still loves you, you're doing your best, you're going to overcome this. That is something so important to hear when you are at the bottom of your life, and that's something that is going to motivate you to get better, which you do not have on the other side, and they did not prove they have a better alternative, and that is why you should vote open opposition. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Leader of the Opposition for that fine speech and call upon the Deputy Prime Minister. Hear, hear.
Just give me a second. I'll start in like. Okay. Yeah, give me a second. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm starting in 3, 2, 1. Alcoholics Anonymous for the last 10 to 20 years has been an autonomous institution, not directly organized or controlled by the church. It already falls on our side, but most of these institutions, which are largely driven by scientific and not religious methods, are already state-funded or specific NGO-funded, who still want to support these very same drug addicts for the same reason of the want to help people and to be empathetic. You do not need God in order to be empathetic, and most of these people already know that. But specifically for governments, you already want to reintegrate these people because they're already workers. And if they are so bad and so addicted that they are literally going to want to ask for anybody for anybody's help, they need treatment, and they cannot work. Thus, they cannot contribute economically to your whole society. Thus, you as a government want to intervene and help them as much as possible. This is why we see concurrent expansions of programs of mental health, specifically in Serbia and in the United States and generally across the world. So, an additional incentives, there is an additional incentive of the community itself to help these very same individuals, because they are oftentimes ashamed if they are not unaddicted or not healthy. They want to reduce the harms that these drug addicted people do to their own community, because they often go into dealing drugs or other criminal related activities. Thus, there is still a community level incentive to create these NGOs and other programs. Thus, the thing that we see is actually a broad expansion, and it is already significantly expanded than it was 20 years ago, when there might have been still a need for these centers, but today that is not the case. So why specifically these centers ineffective? First of all, they're often separated from the whole of society in order for it to work in a religious setting also, and specifically because church property and generally these rehab centers, which are specialized to do this, are outside of main city centers in order to get you as far away as possible from drugs. Thus, they do not practice the reintegration which is done in your local hospital or your local rehab center. Thus, they're unlikely to completely heal you and completely make you go sober, number, because when you return to this very same community where you took drugs, you're going to take drugs again. And this is a very large problem with these centers. Secondly, when you take drugs again, or if there are sometimes located in your local area, you're filled with guilt and shame, because this is directly correlated to your sinfulness, which is something that the church represses, and that it makes you feel guilt and shame every time you do it. But still, you cannot completely fight the urge and the need to take drugs. Thus, you just push yourself into a more and more of a negative emotional spiral, which leads you to do what? Take more drugs. This is very bad for your healing and your mental health in general. And once you relapse, thirdly, you are ashamed to tell anybody in the church or wherever you're going, which is connected to religion, and you're just nominally cured. Thus, you cannot access this very same feeling of being cured. And specifically, the church will not allow you to go through your own problems in the way you can go with a community helper, healer, or a psychologist, because you cannot pass blame on somebody who is not yourself. Thus, likely, you're going to take a much higher emotional and mental burden while through this rehab process, which generally decreases the effectiveness of this very same process. And even more so, the problem with these specifically church actors and its control is the bad practices it has with its authoritarian structure. Notice how in most rehab centers and organizations, the structure is much more free-flowing, much less authoritarian, and significantly less secretive. They have switching roles, specifically in NGO-funded institutions, where you have lots of different doctors taking different roles in order to maximize health. In a church, you have a bishop, you have a priest, and you have the people below. The problem with that is you cannot pass on the blame specifically, and you cannot point out the problems. And even more so, if you point out the problems, it is handled by the church individually outside of the state because of the fundamental separation of church and state. And additionally, church wants to maintain its own secrecy in order to not get punished for breaking secular crimes, which it already does in the status quo, as can be seen with the cases of pedophilia in the Catholic Church in the United States, and also in the re-education camps of specific Inuit people in Canada. This is very bad things that they have already done and that we have known that they have done. But we do not know which specific center does it, because we cannot send our own investigators, because church and state is fundamentally separated both legally and structurally. That's the only way we can do anything, is through passing this very same policy, through removing the possibility of these bad actors continuing to abuse their own power. So, yes, maybe not every single center is this extreme as we have characterized, but notice how these people are already plenty conservative and plenty indoctrinated in their own takes of society and of the universe in general. And specifically, they're taught to be like that because they have been educated from other more conservative and more older individuals who already believe this very hardcore in the current times doctrines of sin and of how you should act with sin. And specifically, the people who are most going to get these jobs as being healers, quote unquote, are the people who are likely going to be the most extreme, because they see their own role as expunging sin from the world. Thus, they're most likely going to use the most abusive methods and the worst possible outcomes from that happen. CEO, again.
Okay, what do you believe is the structure of these centers? Who are employees there? How many people is there, etc.?
These are probably like what we know in Serbia are monasteries, which are specifically dedicated themselves to doing these treatments, or it is in a church setting where a priest is a head of your local rehab center, but it is still inside of a church building, inside of a church confidation. But most of these who are the most looked after and the most well famous are outside and are in specific places like monasteries where it is hard to access as a state. Thus, likely it will be most probably abused. So alternatives, as we have stated, already exist. And why do the religious people, in absence of religious center, already choose to go to these alternatives? First of all, priests already want to recommend them because church and often donates to very same hospitals, but cannot influence on their ideology and cannot influence on their way of treatment. But they're still interconnected, and there is still a level of trust between them. Secondly, you as an individual already, when you are at the rock bottom, you would want to go anywhere, regardless of whether you're religious or not. Thus, you need you do not necessarily need these very same religious rehab institutions. And thirdly, religion can already also be incorporated. This religious structure can be incorporated into these very same treatments, but it must not be under the guise and under the jurisdiction of the church because of its harmful practices. You can still use religious structure inside of traditional and the government or NGO operated rehab centers regardless of whether you're religious or not, you can still have this structure, but you do not have the same abuse. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that fine speech and call upon the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to close the top half. You're here.
Cool. Fix the camera. POIs, please, exclusively in the chat, and I've got to take someone at some point. Cool. Where's my timer? Here's my timer. I'm gonna start in 3, 2, 1. Go. We have heard this so much in debating. Oh, the church is evil, the church is bad. Yes, there's a lot of problematic things that a lot of different religions have done, but there's also a lot of really good things that a lot of religions have done. Some of the biggest charities in the world, like the Red Cross, like the Crescent Moon, all of those different things are still run by religious institutions. Like there's so many good things being done by religion anymore. And at this point, honestly, just really fucking annoying when debaters only go, oh, religion are super, super bad. What we're proving to you in my speech specifically is why this religious coercion and abuse is actually not happening in place, that it is already there, but also extending on Sara's case because they was completely ignored by opening government. So cool, talking about religious coercion that is happening. So first of all, opening government gives you zero proof as to why this this coercion is actually happening when we're talking about treatment centers for drug addicts. Because what is very important to note that this is the status quo. A lot of treatment centers are already run by the church that it is in their place. You have a lot of religious church-run hospitals that have awards for people who are fighting addiction and all of those kind of different things. And at this point, where there's already so much spotlight on the church and so many scandals are being uncovered, which are probably even more protected than something that happens in a hospital or in a treatment center, we probably would have heard something about this. But there's also like, so opening government also just gives you zero reasons of incentives why the churches would be doing this. But now talking about why religion is not actually as bad as debaters like to portray for it. First of all, it isn't, but there's also multiple things. Like, first of all, control of churches is in fact in existence. So if opening government in the first place says that there's enough political capital to care about addicts, and there's also enough political capital to make to put some checks and balances into place. So, for example, the government does control religious religious schools in Europe in most places. They can do literally the same thing. Second of all, the church is already in the spotlight for a lot of bad things that are already being done. So if something bad is happening, it is going to blow up. It is going to be happening. There's a lot of reasons as to why there's also an incentive to figure those things up, to go into these areas and all of those things. But third of all, the issue of not being able to control the church is specifically an area that are directly connected to the religious acts that they are doing. So directly connected to what is the religious freedom. So all of these outskirts things that religions are doing, like religious schools, like religious treatment centers, like a lot of charities, are not actually as protected as this is happening. Like, why do we know about all of the scandals that happened? Because they were leaked, because you can be doing something this. But we are also seeing a switch in how things are being processed. Last week, the Archdiocese of Cologne got a razzia happening there, which was not imaginable previously, because suddenly you are going in, because you can go in, especially in areas that are not directly connected to religious reasons. So there's, additionally to the fact that it just doesn't happen, the abuse to the degree that government wants to portray it, there's multiple safekeeping mechanism in point that is happening. Now I want to continue on to talking about why the religious organization have the incentives in order to be doing it well. Zero reason as to why there's incentive in order to be doing it bad and problematic. There's what we think is positive and altruistic reasons as to why they do it well, and second of all, also just really selfish reasons as to why these religious institution wants to do it well. What are the altruistic reasons? Number one, they do want to do charity. This is like one of the big ideas about Catholicism. Love thy neighbor. You need to be good to others. Like the idea about why religions like the Latter-day Saints make you pay tithings and 10% goes to the church is to do charity in the belief in it of itself. Like, it is one of the guiding principles of most religious beliefs in order to do good, in order to help. So they have a huge incentive to like fulfill this one fundamental belief of the religious doctrine that they are teaching. You would be hypocrites if you teach love and support and help the poor if you don't actually love, support, and help the people in need. But second of all, in terms of the selfish reason that is going to go. Number one, helping people who are on their luck, as Sara says, rock bottom, who are suffering, who are alone, who need the support. makes you look really fucking good if everybody thinks you're a horrendous institution. So doing it well goes against the narrative of you being bad, you not doing it well within this. But second of all, these churches do want new members. There's no reason for them to treat the drug addicts bad and make them not want to keep in the religion. Because if you do help them, then you might keep them within the community, within your religion, within this. So it is a way for you to get new members that want to join your religion within this. So for this selfish reason in and of itself, they have an incentive of doing it well to keep these people alive, happy, and wanting to join there. So what churches offer is something that is very useful for the addicts within this, because this is the characterization that Sara gives you, that OG just first of all completely ignores in terms of like actually explaining to us what addicts need in order to be getting out of the system of addiction and the cycle of addiction that is being created here. Because addicts need so much more than just rehab. Rehab often fails. People relapse and go back to the drugs into there unless something is really deeply changing within their life, within their communities. So just sending them to treatment or just giving a heroin addict methadone does not actually help. But this is what the government very often exclusively does. So first of all, I want to attack the idea of the messaging of sin. Government said that this is such a horrible thing that you say like, oh, it is sinful that you're doing this. We actually say that to a degree, this is a very positive thing to be doing it. Why? Because if you were sucked into this life of drugs, which unfortunately very often, especially with harder drugs, is linked to a life of crime, you do need a guideline in terms of what is right, what is wrong, to get yourself back to being a person that you are more happy with being this. And if you have somebody who tells you what is right and what is wrong, is something that is very supportive and very useful for you in the situation. So we don't know why it is bad that somebody tells you that doing drug-related crime is a sin. Closing off.
Say I'm a well-meaning priest who wants to help people. What do I want to do? Solve a temporary problem that will probably be fixed through purgatory, or preventing from someone to going for hell forever through immediately only focusing on getting them to join the faith?
Why would like a well-meaning priest? So first of all, I think that this is a weird characterization. It is not well-meaning priests who are doing this. The way of how Narcotics Anonymous works is that you go to a weekly meeting in the basement of a church. The way of how treatment centers work is that you go there and stay there and talk to people. So a lot of the things that the priests and all of them are doing is like talking to them, explaining to them. But this is also very important when it comes to the characterization of community that Sara gives you. You need more than just this treatment. You need a community. Making friends as an adult is fucking difficult. At the point where you lost your entire community already because of the drugs that you went through, but also because you have to give up your drug community in order to get away from the drugs. Church gives you this community. They give you people who went through the same thing or at least believe in the same things that you're doing. Why is the government such a bad actor and actually be doing? Sara already covered as to why the government is not doing this. But also very importantly, if the government has all of these incentives, we have proven to you that this abuse is not actually happening to the degree the religious institutions are doing this. At the point where the government also wants to do it, let's have both. Let's treat more people who are addicted. We back you to oppose.
I'd like to thank the DLO for that fine speech. Indeed, all speakers in the top half of our great debate so far. I invite the Member of Government to extend the case for the proposition.
Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just a second. Okay. Thank you, Carly. If you open your cameras, it will cheer me up more than writing in the chat. Okay, just a second. Starting in 3, 2, 1, and a little bit of meta debating before we begin. We are gonna simply show you how those churches and those religious institutions hurts the addicts much more than actually helping them overcome their addiction. And so we will win over OO that seems to think that this is the only way to solve the addiction. And additionally, we will show you why this is mutually exclusive with better programs of helping addicts. And so we will win this debate and OG, obviously. differently. Firstly, a little observation on first half. We think both sides give us really uncharitable characterization. OG sees churches as that evil, and OO thinks that churches and religious institutions are the only ones that can actually give you structure and community. I don't know. I think the debating community can be a great rehabilitation program. I think we have communities. When we are adults, we can create those communities. We don't understand why specifically the meaning that is given by religion is so much better than, for example, the meaning I get from debating. I have a god as well. It's called Anna Schroeder here in this everything. Okay, great. So let's go to the first argument. Why those churches hurt the addicts much more. Firstly, we want to characterize how this probably looks like. We think it looks like they come to you when you are in the lowest point of your life. They offer you both the religion and the drug addict solutions. We think at this point you don't see any other solution. Firstly, because they actively seek for those people to come and join and recruit. Why? Because we think government agencies has no incentive to do that, because they don't want to do active choice. They are already flooded with patients. In the comparative, those institutions see every person that they convert to Christianity as someone that they are saving from hell, so they have an active incentive to do so. And so we think in those places you are the one that is actively being caught up. Why this is very, very bad? Because up until now it sounded very good. So firstly, we think their incentive is firstly for you to be worshiping God, and just after that to be solved from this addict situation. Why is this the case? Because we think that for them, and in their opinion, from their well-meaning opinion, without God and without worshiping God, you will go to hell. But by being a drug addict, it's okay. Like, it's not such a big deal. You can still say sorry, and it will be okay, and you won't go to hell. Most certainly, if you are a believer. And so we think that the thing that they will focus their efforts more than anything else is for you to be convinced that God is the right solution. Notice that here, firstly, this is already our first impact. By wasting your time, simply wasting your time in learning the habits of being a worshiper and anything like that, instead of focusing you on having better habits and forming better habits for you to stop being addicted. But secondly, we think that you will most certainly just fuck up something. Why? Because it is very hard, firstly, to become a believer, and secondly, to stop being a drug addict. We think both of those tests are huge tests, so it is most likely that you will fuck up in everything. Notice how it is much worse in our world. In the comparative that we have in our side, you just fuck up, it's okay. You continue. You didn't hurt anyone but yourself. But what happens in opposition world? We think that the motivation here is so much worse, because when you fuck up, you both fuck up as a believer, meaning that you disappoint God. God is now disappointing. You are so bad. And OO says, oh, this is motivation. This is good. We think that for those people that are so low in their life, this motivation is actually bad motivation, because they already want to be rehabilitated. They want to do what is good, but it is hard for them. So to have another factor that is angry of them is just the worst thing that they can have. But secondly, we think that as much as you feel like God is angry of you, that you are not fulfilling the will of God, you just feel much less confidence. You feel like a bad worshiper, and so you have less ability to continue, because this process requires firstly just the confidence to feel like you can actually do that, and you don't feel like that in opposition's world. But secondly, we think that there is less focus on the reasons that make you be an addict from the first place. We agree with most of the time is you being from a lower socioeconomic class, and we think this is a common conception in every liberal drug addict form. But in those religious places, they focus on you not being Christian enough, not worshiping God enough, and they think this is your problem. They think they have to give you the meaning, and then everything will be okay. Notice this is fucked up, because at the end you still have problems. You still want to overcome poverty and things like that, and they don't deal with the structural resources, with the real resources and the root causes that made you this way, because it is created like a smokescreen by those religious leaders that makes them not able to take the turn on that. This means that you will fuck up after you got out of the rehabilitation center, but down you will feel much worse. You won't seek another thing because your problems haven't been solved. In the comparative, we have extensive care givers. You get more money from the government liberal programs, things like that. And so we think this is much better. But thirdly, we think that just like principally this is simply wrong, because we come to people that can't protect themselves, that are in the lowest point of their life, that can't resist, can't say no, and we force on them the religion because this is their only way to get treatment. Panel, this is an impact that is disconnected with utility and stands for itself, because we think that as much as we don't force kids to worship God, we can't force drug addicts, because it is a huge part of the identity, and it is a choice that you have to do freely and not forcefully. Before I continue,
Basically, no one chooses the religion you're actually going to be in. When religion gives you support and community and meaning, it is actually in a benefit to become
people choose the religion. Even kids, we give them mathematics, we give them other studies so they can get out of religion. We think this is our duty as a government, and we think you can't force that on a person when he is in the lowest stage of his life. Why the comparative? You will have better ways to take care of drug addicts. Firstly, on interest. As much as more bodies are doing that independently, there is a smoke screen that is being created for the government that doesn't see the people that need it most, because the people that actually get and receive the treatment are the ones that are more rich, that are part of the rich religions, that have the most political power. And so people that actually need this, drug addicts that are immigrants, people that comes from minorities, don't get that because those programs are not for them, not for the religions, meaning that Muslims don't get that, things like that. But secondly, we think that just manpower, people that know how to do that, goes to the religious program and not for the people that actually needs them the most. And thirdly, we think we are getting less role models for, again, the people that need it the most, that come from really disenfranchised communities, that comes from the places that are actually drug addicts and are also suffering that much. And so we think we are shifting the resources for the wrong places. This is mutually exclusive and very bad. We call you to propose.
I'd like to thank the member of government for that speech. Call upon the member of opposition here.
Oh, am I audible? Just give me a few seconds to prepare.
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, are you ready? I will be starting the speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, up until now, no one has actually told you who are the people who choose to go into these kind of centers or any other centers. You need to understand that not everyone has a choice to make in this debate. So what are we going to bring you here in my speech? First of all, why these alternatives by the people who are comparative in this debate won't be chosen, even if they exist, which they most likely don't, as I've explained. But secondly, why these people, even if they, don't have the greatest incentive, or I mean, the incentive wasn't actually proven, but they have the ability to do so actually well, because OG claims that they don't. And lastly, why this is actually a long-term solution. But firstly, let's characterize these people. You need to understand, panel, that if you're a person who is an atheist that doesn't believe into anything of these religious type of stuff, you're very much prone to not even think about this as an option. So who are the people who are comparative in this debate? These are people who are prone to religious ideas, most likely are mingling with the religious community, or living with them. Their parents are religious or something like that, and they are the people who are very much possible to actually take this kind of a choice. Why is this crucial? This is crucial because you need to understand what is the comparative in this kind of a scenario when they're making their choice. When these addicts are making their choice, they are looking to possible alternatives that have been given by the government side, and these centers which wouldn't exist in the alternative. Why, if there are no these centers, they won't choose these alternatives on the other side? First of all, they are drug addicts, and they perceive this as something that is very much, how do you say, dangerous for them if they go and they say that they are into these centers. Why? Because first, most likely they will get into problems because this is illegal in most scenarios. But secondly, even if this is actually not true, they're very much afraid in this kind of a scenario. They are afraid, especially when the government tells you about the crime rate and people being locked up and trying to solve that. They're very much afraid of what the outcome might be, and so they try not to risk it in the first place. But secondly, there is a lot of mistrust in these institutions. You need to understand the context, panel, here. After COVID-19, and there are a lot of pushes actually against vaccines, against medication in these kind of situations. And there is a lot of government and institutional mistrust. So these communities spread a lot of rumors and things about how these institutions work. Stuff like you being experimented on if you're going there for some kind of stuff, and stuff about them not being effective, and you taking natural drugs being more effective and stuff like that. But thirdly, and very importantly, there is a lot of stigma around these institutions. They're perceived very badly, as if you're accepting that you're psychologically unstable, and you have grown up thinking that you going to the psychologist or psychiatrist is something that is very much bad in this kind of a scenario. That means that most of these people, even if OG is right and there are actually alternatives, won't choose to take them in this kind of a scenario. But what does this mean? This means that now let's move into the best possible scenario. Even if they choose to go, most likely they're going to relapse, and this is not going to be successful. Why? Because first of all, you don't have the social pressure checks. What does this mean? You're going on weekends, taking this medication and therapy, but most of the time you're not there, and you're not pressured and watched upon whether you're going to relapse. But secondly, when you even are there and treated, you don't have the attention you need. The OG tells you that this problem is growing, meaning there are more and more drug addicts in this kind of a scenario. That means there are a lot of people, and you cannot spend a lot of time per each person. That means that people actually in these kind of situations don't actually aren't able to give you what you need. But secondly, people who work there are usually underemployed, because these are hard scenarios, and there is a lot of bad experiences from COVID-19 working in the medical industry, meaning that people don't actually have enough employees in these kinds of scenarios. And lastly, a lot of these institutions are very costly most of the time, and you don't have a free option. This is why they aren't effective long term. So what is actually effective? We are going to tell you what is effective is actually these centers. And here, OG tells you that they're not doing it on purpose, but OO misses this. They're saying they have a good incentive to do this. We're going to tell you why they're actually able to do this, no matter the incentive. Even if they don't have the best incentive, they have a lot of reasons why they're able to do it well. So what does this look like? And no one addresses this, and my partner points it out in a POI. People who work here are not people who are working career jobs with their, how do you say, evil minds or something like that. These are people from the community who choose to go there. Who are these people? First of all, a lot of people who have experience with this, with priests who have worked and talked with the people with drug addictions. But secondly, and crucially, ex-addicts from the community who know what it is, what it looks like, and want to help someone else. And they are motivated on a daily level actually to help them and understand this kind of a situation. But secondly, these are mostly people from the community who have connections with the medical community. Some of the people who are actually psychologists or psychiatrists that are giving advice, that are coming some of the days of the week to actually help. And lastly, a lot of people who are just normal average people who just want to help, want to talk with you and stuff like that. Most extremely religious people don't have the time nor the incentive to actually work with these people. These are people who want to actually interact and want to help these people to get a better situation. So what is this process now defined like this effective? First of all, you have these priests that explain to you this kind of a scenario, talk to you. These are priests whom first of all you trust, but secondly respect, meaning that you're willing to go through the process and believe them in this kind of a scenario. They're telling you that we're all sinful, only Jesus Christ isn't, and they're trying to push the burden of this off of you and trying to help you in this kind of a scenario. When OG tells you you're being beaten by shovels, this is an extreme example, and priests don't think like this. They think like you're accepting your sin and you actually, how do you say, moving on from it. Secondly, you have group therapies, talking with people who are from these kinds of communities and with people who have these problems as well. This is helping you actually deal with it and have someone who is tying you to solving the problem. Thirdly, you don't use drugs over a longer period of time, not just go to an office and then go back to your place. And that is the fourth reason, is that you're moving away from the things that are making you relapse. You don't go back into the crack house 5 days a week. You actually are able to spend time with these people. But why is this actually much more better, even if there are any alternatives on the government side? Because these actually fix the problem. You have a long-term, how do you say, ability to actually solve this. CG tells you you're introduced to religion. They have an incentive to actually help you in this kind of a scenario. These people are most likely already in contact with religion, but now they are actually more connected to the people that they have met, to the friends, to the community. They're now seeing and talking with them every Sunday and during the week. They're now talking with the priests and with these people. What are their problems? They're trying to help them solve them if they have some problems in this kind of a scenario. OO tells you some vague notion about guiding light. We give you concrete steps about this. We tell you why this is good, why you have a support system that is giving you the ability to actually go through with it, and afterwards, even if this is somewhat short-term effective, even you won't relapse. Well, I'm like on the government side. This is why we win from CO. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the member of opposition for that fine speech and call on the government whip to conclude the case for the proposition. Carrier.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
Great. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1, and I'll first explain to you why this entire alternatives thing, whether or not alternatives exist and whether or not people are going to go into alternatives, is a non-issue which isn't going to win the debate. Then I'm going to talk about what is actually going to win the debate, which is number 1, what is the interest of these religious organizations? And then number 2, what do these interests actually cause them to do? And are they therefore better than the existing alternatives who are far more secular and better? Let's just start on why alternatives is really not a non-issue, right? Because opening government says, oh, there are incentives of people to do alternatives, and then opening opposition says, no, there are incentives of people to not do alternatives. They're individualistic and all of these different reasons. Simply note that the burden of opening opposition in this debate is far higher than the burden of opening government in this debate. Because if there are a couple of people who want to do alternatives, if there are a couple of reasons to do alternatives, then you're still going to get some private charities who are going to do so and going to open up. You're still going to get some government support for these programs. You don't need everyone agreeing that you need alternatives to exist for the people who support them to donate, for pressure existing on government in order to enable it and all of that. This is simply just a very, very, very low burden of them existing, especially when you notice that alternatives likely aren't that all expensive, right? In order to run a drug rehab charity, what you need is a room to sit people in, like a community rec center, which is relatively cheap. You need like 1 or 2 workers that are probably the main burden of the cost, but not even that high. And then you can just copy the well-known psychological methods that everyone has an interest to propagate out and to allow more and more people to know what are the available methods to get people out of drug addictions and rehabilitation, because there is a general societal interest that people aren't going to be rehabilitated. Why is this important? Because it means that, number 1, there are alternatives. No, religious institutions probably do still pull people out of these alternatives. Otherwise, there is no debate. They still propagate, they still advertise themselves and all of that. But number 2, note that this means that it is not enough of a burden for OG to win the alternative case, because it's a relatively low burden case to begin with, and also because of the fact that opening opposition doesn't just attack them on alternatives, but on a far more prescient question on whether or not these institutions are actually good in the first place, and whether or not the abuse will happen. If opening up to the government doesn't show to you why all that's terrible, then even if alternatives exist, they don't have enough of a reason to ban them. That's where we directly move. Secondly, on closing opposition's case. Look, closing opposition says people aren't going to go into these alternatives. Why do they say that? Number 1, because rehabilitation centers are illegal and you are scared of them. I think that people are far more scared of drugs, which are actually illegal and scary, and not rehabilitation centers that are very legal and very comparatively less scary. Number 2, that there's distrust of the medical system. They simply just conflate big pharma, COVID-19 from your local drug rehabilitation center. I think that most people can make the difference between a local social worker and big pharma companies that they don't know anything about, and that they scaremonger around about vaccines. People generally say, okay, my local doctor is good, but like the COVID-19 institution, big pharma, all of that is generally bad, and it's never explained why these are equivalent. And number 3, it is the fact that the stigma with the drug rehabilitation institutions will tell you that for religious people, which is the group that COs tries to win on, drugs are far more of a stigmatized than rehabilitation centers that are seen are far more better. But note here that under opening opposition characterization, as in religious institutions want to do good, they want people to not be remove from drugs. Religious institutions have asymmetrical pressure on them to get people to go into rehabilitation centers, whether or not they're set by them or whether or not they're not set by them. So all of closing opposition's mechanizations of, oh, the religious institution forces you and the community forces you and ex-drug rehabilitation forces you are likely symmetrical, because they want you to not be addicted. So they probably symmetrically make you go into that completely fine local drug rehabilitation center, which isn't whatsoever like a big pharma COVID-19, all of that. Okay, let's now move into important questions within the debate. Number 1, interests. Look, OPG are very, very, very good at describing to you potential harms, right? At describing to you, oh, these are going to just force you to do a lot of terrible stuff, and these are going to abuse you, and it's not going to work and all of that. And then they say that's true because they have the ability to be abusive. Note here 2 things. Number one, opening opposition directly attacks them on whether or not they have the interest in the first place. Simply think that opening opposition does more analysis to win the clash. Number two, it is also important in the sense that once there are alternatives, that individual drug addict might not choose to go into a rehabilitation center, but still has a choice to which rehabilitation center to go to. That is to say, it is unlikely that they're going to go to the bad rehabilitations, into the horribly abusive rehabilitation centers. The characterization of a rehabilitation center that is actually within your interest and religious is probably a far more likely characterization at the point at which these groups still have some autonomy remaining. What is important here is to know the conflation from opening opposition. That is to say, a rehabilitation center being good, religious, and wanting what is good for you, and being charitable and wanting people to have good lives and all of that, does not mean that they are objectively doing what is good and that their interests are in line with general good. That is to say, Yael analyzes to you specifically what these rehabilitation centers see as doing good and helping the community. They see it as forcing you into religion. They see you as beings without any agency, as naturally capable of sin, unless you are taken into religion and without any agency for yourselves. They see you as they try to focus specifically on your mental game and not on anything surrounding your reality, the root causes that made you addicted in the first place. All of these are interests that we can do. They're doing good. They want to be good. They simply are shackled by the religious mindset. They're simply just shackled by the fact that they see getting people out of hell and living as far more important than temporary things. They're simply shackled by the fact that they inherently believe that you have no autonomy because human beings have no autonomy under God. These are completely within OO's characterization of wanting to do good, but actually explain what they're likely to see good as. Before we continue, I will take over.
The government has given zero analysis on why there are governmental incentives to actually help addicts who are not the voting base or vulnerable minority big groups of people care about. If they had this, then we are living in a best-kept world where most people get help because both institutions are giving help.
I already explained all of that beforehand. I will continue. Note here that when we look at opening opposition's impacts of what they actually give you, these are entirely symmetric at the point to which you understand the already explained point that alternative likes they exist, but religious orgs do advertise like they are very strong within collective consciousness, like Alcoholics Anonymous is a big organization, so they likely take them away, right? Because of their explanations of like structure, it is likely that every single rehab organization wants to give you some level of structure in your life and can tell you what to do and get all of that. Meaning, they probably do try to give you other forms of meaning, as Yael explains to you. Community, they probably do like put you within with other ex-addicts. They probably do try to give you friends to do all of that, and likely that they are going to try to give you a moral framework. The social worker is going to tell you what is good and what is not good. Yael's analysis is about what is unique to these religious organizations specifically, going from the characterization of the charity, by the fact that they oftentimes simply just are time wasters and give you a lot of time, by the fact that they don't believe in your agency and therefore cannot actually give you the tools to work within yourself, by the fact that they try one method to fit all when people are far more individualistic in general. All of these analyses are far more likely to occur and far more likely to be comparatively effective, explaining to why uniquely religious organizations are bad at the point at which we understand that this is the main question in the debate, therefore winning for CG.
I'd like to thank Government Whip for that fine speech, and lastly call upon the Opposition Whip to conclude the debate. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Let's first compare with OO, and then I will rebut GovBench. First, like OO is making a point that these people won't receive treatment from the government because the government doesn't care about addicts because they're not a relevant voting group. We take this, we agree with this point, but we take a larger burden. We say that even if we take best scenario, that government maximally cares about these people, we say they cannot help every addict. First of all, because of personal reasons why these people won't go. That is stigma, that is fear of being prosecuted, especially as OG is mentioning rock bottom. If they're in the rock bottom, they probably use the most illegal substances, possibly were involved in some criminal activities, so they do not want to go in rehabilitation centers because they're afraid they will be prosecuted and end up in jail. They don't want that. Also, they And there are accessibility issues. Two things here. First is overcrowded centers. Even NGO that saying NGO in debate is not like a way to solve every social problem, because they just don't work to that extent. And basically they are not that, they don't have that large of a scope, and they are not magical institutions. Yes, they help some, but they are still overcrowded centers and not enough place for all people to fit in. Second is cost of the treatment, especially in US, where people do not have insurance, especially if they're like on really bad economical situation due to their addiction, and especially in US, where we now have fentanyl epidemics with many people being addicted. We cannot help every person with the things that governments are proposing. Other than abuse that they talked about, and that I want to rebut, we can concede everything that they are talking about, how some other centers are good. We agree, they are good, but they cannot help everyone. So basically what we have is delta of people, what is changing for people who can otherwise not access a treatment, and why this is helping them. So basically our weighing with our opening on this, that we clearly explain you the change that will happen under this motion, and give you an excessive reason and explanation of group that wouldn't access treatment otherwise. So on abuse, 5 responses here. First, OG talks about secularity as if church can done everything, especially in Western countries. This is not true, because if you are breaking the law, you will be charged and prosecuted, and beating someone up is breaking a law, as is everything else that church in the past was prosecuted for. Secondly, family of these addicts, even if they love God, they love their child more, meaning they want to see them coming back alive, and will basically not just send them away and never ask for them to, so they will be checks and balances. Third, modern technology, like we are not debating this in 2001. You can tell your story really easily through all the means, and put the spotlight on the possible abuse that is happening. Fourth of all, these are centers, not one person that is like ruling everything. Like these are centers with many people that are working as checks and balances for each other, that come from different backgrounds, as my partner told you, ex-addicts that are helping, volunteers, people from the church. So you will need 20, 30, 40 people to agree that some form of abuse is okay in order to mass scale abuse to happen, and we do not say that is the case. Fifth of all, we say that perception of religious institution, especially in the West, about the scandals that happened in the past with pedophilia and everything, like we say that they're in the lens, under the lens of public. They need good perception of religious institution because of all donations which keep them like spreading their faith, and also because of the legislature, because if they want a government to change a law that in the way that suits them, they want to have good perception in order for them to collaborate with them. So we say that abuse will be minimized, and even if it exists, it will not be even close to what OG is portraying. And note that OG didn't give any structural reasons then, oh, this exists once in Serbia. Like you can't lie about Serbia when you have Serbs in the room. Like that is not the case. So basically, even if we concede some level of abuse, all people that won't be treated will suffer much greatly. And how is that so? So sorry to break it to you, but addicts don't live glamorous life if not treated. So if we explain to you that alternative is much worse and not receiving any treatment, you need and you accept, like, because if you abolish these religious treatment centers, you will accept people being in constant pain due to drug withdrawal, people being sexually assaulted, especially women that are addicts. Second, people being homeless or living really poor because they cannot keep the job, them being rejected by the family, beaten up by drug dealers, possibly overdosing to death, right. And basically not now. So basically, possibly overdosing to death, and we completely disagree that should be done, and we are proposing that we do something about it. Now let's deal with CG. Like they say, this will hurt addicts more than helping them. These centers, they're first of all portraying as will force them to go into these institutions. No, I don't have time. Sorry. Portraying as if we don't have we will force them to go into these institutions. So we only say they should exist as an option for people who find them suitable. So basically, they just assumed, oh, government doing something good, religion doing something that's bad. So basically, if it helps these addicts avoid terrible life or even that situation due to overdose, we are fine with them being treated through religious beliefs. We never heard an explanation why that is so terrible and can be helped. And yes, and also they just assume that abuse in public institutions cannot happen. It in best case is symmetrical. No reason why why government won't do something bad, why any public institutions want to do something bad. And even we are playing example game. We have many examples of people being abused in public institution, but it's iterative process and it's basically going better and better. So if you want to help these privileged people that are suffering, you need to vote CO.
I'd like to thank the opposition whip for a fine speech, indeed all speakers for what was a great debate. Another round of applause to all teams for making the final. At this point, I will stop the recording.